Hi, folks. We're Masters Radio, an online music community finding ways to enjoy and support the master artists who created the soundtrack to our lives. We can show that musicians on our platform will benefit from increased exposure, engagement, healthcare, and other benefits, fundraising, and growth opportunities that all empower them to thrive. Today, we're thrilled to have multi talented songwriter, producer, and Styx band member Will Evankovich joining us. Will has been at the creative helm of Styx's last three albums, co-writing on The Mission, Crash of the Crown, to stepping on stage on recent tours. And now he's front and center on their brand new concept album, Circling from Above, which I believe comes out July 18th. We're going to dive into his journey from behind the console to behind the mic, explore some of the themes that tie the songs together, and uncover some stories behind the sounds. Will, thank you for being here. Your artistry and passion have been such an inspiration to our Masters Radio community. As I was prepping for this interview, I saw an recording of you and Jack Blades. Night Ranger's a great friend of Masters Radio, Bratton and Eric. We talk to you from time to time. But you and Jack Blades doing dirty work on acoustic guitar.
Was it in a radio station?
It was at a radio station. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it actually, I remember that it was supposed Tommy was supposed to be there as well because it was on the Shaw Blades tour, but he had some throat issues that morning, so we did it without him, and of course he's sorely missed everywhere he goes. The two of them sound great together, but that was fun. That was a long time ago, I think.
It was 18 years ago plus, and yeah, it's a long time ago. Well, but that depends on your perspective, I guess. But yeah, it was that many years ago, and the reason I found it was I was looking to hear you vocally because I know on this album, this is the first time you've got a recording where you're in lead vocals, right?
I have two songs I sing, and maybe 2.5 because I sing a bridge on one of the songs. But yeah, I sing a couple of the tracks on the record. Yep, yes.
Very good. So when you've crossed now from behind the console onto the stage, I mean, you've been playing on the stage in their tours, of course, but when you're recording for an album, what internal shift did you feel creatively, personally?
Well, I've always been a singer songwriter and have fronted a lot of bands from the 80s all the way to the 90s. And so I wasn't really an engineer, so to speak. I'd only learned how to do it because I was sorely disappointed with so many different, records I was making, and I couldn't really convey what I was trying to get across. So I had learned it out of necessity. And really, well, that the first thing is that I'm a writer artist foremost, and then I just kind of do that when needed. But these days we actually hire a host of really great engineers to do the records, probably infinitely more talented than I am. And so it's when I started working with Tommy, it was just a couple of songwriters getting together in a room and seeing what we could flush out.
And now that pair is expanded into three, as I understand it. You're co-writing as a trio now. All the songs are credited to Lawrence Gowan, who's been a guest on our show before a couple of times as well. So when you're doing that, blending three distinct music sensibilities, has there been a moment when an idea from another writer startled you? Maybe became a seed for some sort of breakthrough?
No, the three of us started writing together in the mission, and we realized we could do that, and it was a potpourri of different ideas from the three of us. And what's great about it is the other guy or the other two guys have ideas or concepts that are totally out of your wheelhouse, and vice versa. So you're throwing together all these parts that the other person wouldn't think of. It's never jarring or startling. Sometimes it's like, wow, I didn't think of that. That's crazy. Let's do it. It's always it's a fun surprise. And sometimes there's a little bit of creative friction, but for the most part, we all want the same thing. So
Yeah, you can't make a diamond without friction, otherwise it's a piece of coal. Yeah, I bet not a rude surprise, but pleasant surprise that these guys think of things, and you said it, not in your wheelhouse. That don't normally come to you musically. The music writing, I suspect, is always a bit of experience mixed with inspiration. And so, because those two things don't come together the same for any two people, I
yeah,
imagine
it's
it's
very
always a
subjective.
collaboration.
The good news is that the three of us have very similar influences, and I think that is what makes it work. It could you have the Queen, Beatles, Pink Floyd, The Who, all those things floating around in our heads. So when we hatch ideas and throw them at each other, it's not a total left turn. We kind of know where it's coming from.
Yep. Good. So on that note about inspiration and the three of you hashing this out, what's sort of the idea of using this metaphor of the starlings and satellites, that build and or versus destroy? Where'd that come from?
Well, the first thing I want to do is clarify the little bit of the misnomer that caught fire and went around the internet is it's really not a concept record. It never was intended to be one. It I could see how it's interpreted that way because of the cover and the first two songs. The first two songs do go together thematically and they do go together lyrically, and we kind of reflect it in the cover of the record. The rest of the record has no thread necessarily on those two things. So we just kind of wanted to get out there like, well, everyone thinks it's a concept record, but it's not. Um, the mission definitely was. Crash of the Crown wasn't intended to be a concept record either. The first two songs definitely have the thread of technology and mankind, our relationship to it. The idea that, basically humans have a hard time working together, whereas the animal kingdom does not. So it's we end up fighting a lot of the we fight each other. We fight the tech kind of brings us down. We have all kinds of issues with each other, whereas starlings are the most symbiotic creature on the planet. If one takes a slight movement in one direction, the rest of them follow. It's incredible. um,
It absolutely is. Yeah.
so we just kind of we threw this starling image in a classic Storm Thurgeson sort of album cover way, where there's the dilapidated broken satellite that's not working. These guys are working over here.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, that mess with Mother Nature. Yeah, no, I never would consider it a concept album because Styx has got a history of that, going back a number of years. Obviously, Mr. Roboto, was a full blown concept album. The mission you mentioned, Roboto, interestingly prescient, with some of the things about how AI might be implementing it in music and changing the way people consume music. Um, yeah, I would not have thought of it as a concept album. I do think of it as a good Styx album in turn. Not that any of them were not. It's just that
Right.
it's some of the songs on there, and more to the point, some of the playing on there. I had not heard quite as obvious uh, Dennis DeYoung style synth patch, just the sound tone quality of it, as I've heard some of this on this record. Some of the guitar playing is obviously, very much Tommy Shaw a la Crystal Ball era of acoustic guitar, finger picking stuff. It's definitely a Styx album, but you're right. I would not have ever considered it a concept album. That wasn't my intent, but it is indicative of you guys have got this flair for combining a number of really interesting styles into an album. And I think it really started when Tommy coming in and literally changed the entire band's direction many, many years ago. Some of that is there. The songs that are clearly his. It's easy to see. So what JY does, JY was always a entirely different direction
Yeah.
than the younger and the people that were also writing way back in the early days. So yeah, I would not have thought of this one as a concept album, but it sounds the most Styx like for what I think most people expect who may not have been as involved or listened to as much of the album since the 2010s. Um, and I think the pairing, I'm hoping it's a pairing that you're going to be some of what's on circling with what's part of your whole grand illusion, where you're playing the whole album. I think there's some songs that'll fit really well together there. Do you agree?
They do. Because it's a package tour and there's usually really tight curfews in the amount of time you have. You've got, Don Felder and you've got Kevin Cronin. So everything's very tight. So we have a limited amount of time that we can actually get all the hits, the grand illusion, and we do manage to slide in Build and Destroy.
Okay.
And so if you get a little flavor of the new album, you get obviously a classic, great older record. You get all the hits. And come fall, when we have a little bit of our own shows and our own timeline, we can actually slide in more of the songs from the new record.
Very good, yeah, because there is some real great pieces on there besides Build and Destroy It that are entirely different from that. Now, I think if people only hear that, and that's what they're getting now on the video, they won't really appreciate what that album can offer them. Um, so let me see. Your role has grown now because you started out, like I said, engineering, or not engineering, but producing the first two records, moving into now is you were writing songs even back then. But when you look back on this, compared to the age some of the other guys are in the band, what's the dynamic there? How does it feel to be? I've actually watched other interviews with him, and you're very kind to the rest of the band, and I'm sure that they are a great bunch of guys to work with. But it had to be kind of interesting being the kid, the new kid working in the band. And I suspect the same is for Gowan, the two Gowans as well. Um, does it bringing in fresh blood have great opportunities as well as challenges?
I never felt for 1 minute that it was that they were older, and I don't think they felt the other way around either. I think that Tommy and the other guys we're all a bunch of 12-year-old kids, really, and nobody's looking at it in the way that, oh, what do you, okay, youngster, what do you got going? It's basically just what you can offer and what they offer and how we work together. And so, like I said, I never really felt like the whippersnapper joining the band. They're just great creative people. I could have, if I was older, I would have probably been writing music with these guys a long time ago. It's just, the way it worked out. And so I met Tommy with Shaw Blades around 2006. And from there, we realized after a few years that we actually worked really well together in songwriting. And that kind of took shape when I helped co-produce The Great Divide, the record. And we discovered that period, we discovered that we could actually write some really cool songs. Now, some of them sat around for a while. The irony is that Red Storm was written around 2009 or 10 and then surfaced for The Mission. And Michigan was also, almost as you hear it, was hatched around that same time. And now it's on this record. I think some time needed to pass, and Styx needed to figure out what the sound was currently today that it was going to be, and then we would have license to obviously have this be Styx 2.0, I guess, or the newer version.
Yeah, it certainly has been an evolving opportunity for you guys coming in. I see you guys, the Gowans. I first spoke with Lawrence. He was alone in the band, and then now his brother's on board as well. The second time I spoke with him, and he, like you, said two things. One, we've been doing this all along, and we brought music, our writing and our music to this, and helped meld it in there. But he also said this stuff makes me feel young.
Right.
Maybe this is what keeps me young. So he's agreed with you in the two interviews that we've had. Because I got to believe that going out there, one of the things he pointed out, and I suspect you need to see it as well, is that there's an entirely new generation of people who did not grow up with the Styx albums that, I remember I got four Styx albums as part of my 10 albums you get for a penny at
Oh,
Columbia
yeah.
Record House. Yeah,
Columbia
right.
Record House. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So,
That's how they broke
um,
in.
yeah. So look, you're not as young as I thought you were. Right. So,
I sadly fell victim to the Columbia Record House on numerous occasions for the penny.
yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
then they kept sending some crappy records, months later, and you're stuck with them. Yeah.
Yep, that's right. But I was able to pick out all four in a row, the first six records. But there was an entire generation of people showing up to shows, and I saw them when I was there with you guys last summer. Loris just mentioned the same in our interview, that seemed to be getting into the music as well. And one of the things I love about circling is that there are some songs that sound like stick songs on the record from that era. And so that there's an homage to that's the way it was, as well as there's some stuff on there that I would never have anticipated hearing on a Styx record. Blue Eyed Raven, the closer, you know, that is, first of all, it's great finger picking. And I wanted to know who's playing the fiddle, but that to me, that's got to be all Tommy Shaw and some of his bluegrass roots. Am I right about that?
When that song surfaced, actually sometime around the Crash of the Crown era, and I think it might have been either post Crash or Tommy had fully flushed out the song 100%. It was basically as you hear it now, except for I suggested adding a rocking ending with a burning gypsy fiddle solo. And we all put that together at the end. It was also kind of short on its own, so we needed to I think, rock it up. Um, but yeah, he hatched that song pretty much 100% on his own, and it again, it to me, it's like a boat on the river 2.0. It's different, but it's world music influenced, much like Boat is. Boat had tremendous success in Europe charting. A lot of people don't realize that, and so he's very diverse in his writing. So it's not uncalled for that he comes up with something like that out of the blue.
Been following his career as well from his days or the solo career that he had all the way through. Of course, him with his work with Jack Blades, Dan Yankee, all of that. Yeah, he's been an incredibly diverse writer. We Lost the Wheel. That's one of yours, right?
Yes.
Yep, yep. That's a great bluesy rock song, and I always remember that it was to me growing up with Styx. JY was the rocker. JY was in Miss America. JY was the if you had a hard rock influence in Styx as opposed to sort of a prog rock, which was a lot of the Dennis stuff going on. And We Lost the Wheel is a great bluesy rock song. And I just think that's fantastic. Is that a harmonica in here? Is
Harmonica.
that a
No,
keyboard?
there's one. I do play harmonica in King of Love,
Oh, King
but
of Love. Sorry, King of Love. I
yeah,
mixed up the songs.
but
Yeah, yeah,
but We Lost the Wheel is basically, I'm a giant Who fan, and you mentioned JY, and
yeah.
JY is a giant Who fan, and when
Yes.
you hear The Great White Hope and you hear all these Who influenced songs, Lorelei from Styx's catalog, again, it's not out of reason to have a Who influence based thing. I happen to be one too, JY, and I share that in common. And I was trying one day for fun as an experiment. I was listening to Who's Next, and I'm like, what's really cool about the production of this is that Pete Townsend doesn't shred an electric guitar. He shreds an acoustic guitar, like in songs like Bargain and these other things. So I thought, well, why don't I do this guitar, more this acoustic picture of it, do a bunch of acoustic licks, um, and then, of course, try to sound like Roger Daltrey to the best of my ability, which I probably sound nothing like him, but I'm a huge Who fan, and that's where that song comes from.
You and me both.
Usually, I live more in the prog rock, Beatles, Queen, but that's very much part of my DNA as well. So
Yep. Yep. We all are proud of our influences. You mentioned Queen. I'm listening to Everybody Raise Your Glass the first time, and I'm like, right down to the guitar tone. Like, that's a Queen song. And then, of course, the harmonies come in, and oh, it's a Styx song. But it really did have a lot of Queen feel to it. Was that on purpose?
there is this studio way out in the woods, way out in the woods of Forestville, California, called In the Pocket. My friend Greg Halden owns, and he was kind enough to host us going in there after a tour run. Tommy Lawrence and I drove out to this beautiful country and went into the studio where we couldn't be bothered by anybody. Um, I had watched, some of those documentaries, the Hockey Chateau, the making of, and the common denominator in all those, when they used to make records, they would go somewhere to not be bothered by anyone, and they could really focus. And so the three of us go to this retreat, and we hatch Everybody Raise Your Glass. And at first, it was going very Beatles like, and it's still very Beatley. But the words, the lyrics or the melodies just didn't really fit. We wanted it to rock, so we went more to the Queen side of things, and that's where that came from. But it was like 40 hours of us just carving away, putting down great parts. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And yeah, you're right. I mean, Todd Rundgren out in Bearsville, New York, nothing up there, but his
Right.
studio, that the guys in Leonard Skinner with that terrible little shack in
Yeah,
Jacksonville, out in the, Gator country. Yeah, you're right. You have to isolate yourself to make sure that there's nothing that interferes with the muse as it rises, right?
absolutely. And I
To
wish
this
we could
effect.
do it more, but life as you get older, and I don't have to tell you this, but I mean, there's mortgages, there's kids, there's graduations, there's life is filled with life events that you're not 25, struggling musician in a garage. You're a grown up now, and so to do those sorts of things, you have to be very deliberate about it. You know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely true. So, but let's not call it a distraction. With circling from above now out, and of course the tour is underway. But sometime after that, what's next for Will? What kind of creative endeavors are you and Styx, or even you will with others thinking about?
I've amassed quite a few songs that I would hope to put out at some point in the next year or two. I'll obviously take a respite with Styx. Is we've been very prolific and we've put 3 records out, and now's the time I think for me to release some music just in a different platform. Or who knows, maybe some of the songs will make their way to another Styx record. I don't know. That Tommy's very creative. He's always writing. It's hard to tell what's going to happen now. We have a little bit of a record hangover, like we usually do when we finish, and we just take a little bit of a break, talk about this one, help promote it. But we're always being creative for sure.
Yep. Yeah, you have to get again. They get let the muse rise, so that means getting some of this other stuff out from behind you. Speaking yesterday with Dean Roland of Collective Soul, another one, his brother, like Tommy, there's always songs coming, pouring into his head, and their plans as well to get a record out after the tour. It's coming out maybe wintertime or something like that when you're kind of snowbound. And I think one of them lives in San Diego, one in Florida, so they're never snowbound. But
Uh,
but they,
Ed and I have threatened to write together and work together. It still hasn't happened. Who knows?
oh man, that would be
I'm a
wonderful.
big fan of his. So
Absolutely, yeah. The documentary they just did is something to behold.
that's what I
Just the
hear.
process, yeah, it's quite good. So I do encourage you to check that out. It would be kind of cool to see something like that for Styx, because look at the long story they had. I mean, I was joking with Dean yesterday. I said, "You only got 30 years." Again, I'm talking tomorrow with a band that's been doing it for 50. You
Right,
know,
right,
and so
right. That's
but yeah, it's got to be cool to have seen the business change, and I'm sure there's better and worse. Part of what this record is about is how AI is kind of making us not better humans in the right way, and and we've always had what's wrong with us. Be wrong with us, but the idea that we can amplify that as well as we simply can these days kind of gets in the way. It's kind of neat to see. Um, People working together are willing to break outside of the boundaries of a band or the boundaries of a genre, et cetera. And the people in Styx have been doing that a lot. So it's kind of cool to see that. That's why I asked about it. What would you like fans to know that we haven't talked about yet, Will?
regarding the record or just regarding anything.
Anything,
uh,
anything. This about
we
6 million people will see this, so have at it.
well, I'm proud of this band for always taking chances. We try to do things different. Every record, some people will be upset that doesn't sound enough like the Mission. Some people are upset that it doesn't sound like Crash. But if we're doing our job correctly, we're moving forward as an artist. You may not particularly like the next Picasso period after the Blue period, but that's the thing. You got to keep pushing the envelope. And what's great about these guys is they are willing to do that. And they've been willing to do it with their old catalog. And you wouldn't have, in my opinion, I think the Grand Illusion and Paradise Theater there's a lot of, they've moved. It's a progression. And so here we are in 2025. And I just, I urge people maybe just to give it a chance based off of what it is here now. And then we were getting some great feedback from it, and we got some great feedback from the last two. So we're just going to keep moving ahead. The alternative is having nothing at all, and that's not good either. So
Yeah, yeah. Or worse than nothing, thinking you have something and it's really the same old rehash of stuff you've been doing
right.
decades and decades and decades. That's what tribute bands are for. Let them do that. Yeah, you guys have to move forward. And I run into this. Our job at Masters is to promote new music from artists first popular more than 20 years ago. So when you're putting your music together, please think of us. We want to play it. We don't play
Awesome.
any deep catalog. That's Sirius XM's job, and we love them. We've got members of them on our advisory board. That's fine. We want to be the place where their stuff is being played now. And
Right.
I run into this. Well, it's not really Styx. It's a cover band because no original members. I'm like, no, not it at all. And we have Foghat. They're great friends of ours. And some of the best music Foghat's ever written is on this new album where they have one living original member. Some of the best music Styx has ever written, in my view, is on this new album. It's you're right. It's going to evolve. It's going to be something different, and you may need to drag the fans kind of kicking and screaming along a little bit.
Well,
Like,
the people that are willing to listen or curious or they want, they're going to be there. The ones that decide before they even hear it that they hate it, that's a whole nother thing. People have strong feelings about music. I always say at the end of the day, I'm grateful that people care that much. You know, they it's great. People are very passionate about it, and so they have a lot of different strong opinions. Um, but you wouldn't have new music in 1979 if they weren't making new music, and we have new music now. It's let's just keep doing that because that's what keeps art alive.
Yep. Indeed, it does. And context matters. I mean, there was a lot of hue and cry about Roboto when it first came out. And there was a lot of some people have seen as far as saying it killed that band, which wasn't the case, of course, because here you are. But there's that. I was surprised to hear some of that last summer when I saw you guys at Roboto was in the set list. Why? Because some of what it brought was very valuable to the generation that A, heard it, and B, is listening to it even for the first time now. So context matters in this. And I think you guys have found a really nice niche. I encourage you that whatever you think of the early history of Styx or Styx as you grew up, you ain't that person anymore. They're not that band anymore. And the best part is it, you have an opportunity to listen to some fantastic music on Circling from Above, and I encourage you to do it. Uh,
And there is three of the five original members on this record, and you have the newer members like myself and Todd and Terry and Lawrence, and it's kind of a new and old guard mixture, and you get a lot of great classic Styx sound out of there, but you get the classic Styx sound, but via 2025 with of course our influence as well. So
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and as I said, it's a great opportunity for you to hear some fantastic music. And one of the things that's changed, and you're a producer, so you know this: the quality of music creation has tremendously grown. Now, the problem with that is consumption, right? Most people are listening to it on earbuds from Spotify. But at the same time, but you can fix that. There's outlets that play that stream at much higher quality and stuff like us and others. But so it really is kind of cool to listen to great Tommy Shaw finger picking on Blue Eyed Raven compared to Crystal Ball. The quality of the tone and stuff is just really there and out front and better than it was in '77.
well, we have, some of those tools they used. I mean, they recorded that album at Paragon, which had a Flickinger console, which I know I'm getting nerdy here, but they're really amazing consoles. Obviously, the trends in mastering and other platforms from after it's recorded to when it gets to a record was a little bit of a different process back then. So yeah, now we have some really great ways of recording, or I should say, transferring the great recordings into a digital format. But it I don't know that there's a charm to those old records. I love how they sound as well. It's
They
something.
have a warmth, they're distorted, short. They don't have the frequency response of even CDs, but they have a warmth. This brought vinyl back. It's I'm looking at it huge again. It's a
And
really
that's a
big
great
deal.
way to listen to records now. If you want a little bit of a classic sound versus something new, and the vinyl of our new records sounds amazing. I couldn't be happier.
Yeah, I can only have the .wav file, so I don't know, but I'll have to go out and get the vinyl to find out. But
Yeah,
I had to buy another record player for just that reason. I got rid of my record player years ago and I had to buy a new one. And you mentioned something in another interview that I watched about the idea of albums sort of building in an act one and act two,
right. Yeah.
right? So you
Well,
actually have that opportunity.
we are an AOR driven band and always have been, and I personally in any of my endeavors prior to this have always made records that way. And I think it's important. It's kind of the art form that we won't let go of, even if we know most of this stuff's on a streaming channel or most of it is contiguous play down. That side one and two is very important to
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. And God forbid the shuffle, right? Yeah. So,
Right.
so what would Pet Sounds be if we'd had a shuffle, right? Yeah.
Have the same. You'd have the end of the movie before the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. How awful would that be? Well, It has been an absolute joy having you on Masters Radio. Thank you, Will, for sharing your stories, your creative insights, that passion that has made Circling from Above such a great record. Thank you for our listeners for tuning in. The record comes out. It's called Circling from Above. Comes out July 18th. We're playing songs on it now on Masters Radio. You can also hear it in all the outlets that you can buy it, and they will be in the show notes that we put in here. Will, it has been a treat. I'm looking forward to seeing you a week from Saturday. Like I said, got my fingers crossed that Live Nation gets me in there, lets me in there okay. Um, and I buy a lot of beer, so they should. Um, but tell Todd and Lawrence that Adam says hello from Masters Radio. And again, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having us, Adam.
Right.
Appreciate you listening to the record.